This is a day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It is great to see all of our visitors this morning. It is awesome to have you here. It is great to be back. If you have never taken the 95 out of Coeur d'Alene down south and then hit 55 and go into Boise, gorgeous drive. I've wanted to do that drive for years, and we got to do it, and especially this time of year with the colors. You drive through the canyons, and it's just beautiful. Wasn't here last week, as Alex pointed out. I want to thank the congregation for giving me the opportunity to go to a lectureship or gospel meeting or conference or whatever once a year, and this is the first time that we've been able to use it. And so we went down to the Linder Road, which is in Meridian, I always want to say Mississippi, Meridian, Idaho, which is between Boise and McCall. So when you say Meridian, people go, what? And you say Boise, and they go, okay, yeah, I know where you're at. But so we went down there. We left here Thursday morning. The lectureship started Thursday night and ran through Sunday night. But it was awesome. And let me tell you, I had been studying for 2 weeks to do a different sermon this morning. And Thursday morning, I decided, you know what? I'm going to talk about this. It was just too much, and just too much information to not talk about and to share with you this morning. There's no way that I could cover all the material. So I would encourage you to go to YouTube, click or type in Linder Road Church of Christ. It will bring up some videos. Go down and click on one as of last for the alligator, isn't it? A little snack. And he'll open his mouth. And this little bird will go into his mouth. The alligator will close his mouth ever so slightly. And that bird goes around and cleans the alligator's teeth. And then after a couple of minutes, the alligator will open his mouth. The bird will go down to the water and probably rinse his mouth out of all the garbage it has ate. Some scientists think he's getting nourishment and just getting water. But then he'll come back up to the alligator. The alligator will open his mouth again. The bird will climb into the mouth, and he'll close his mouth, and the bird will again go around and clean his teeth. Now tell me how, through evolution, this bird and this alligator made up this arrangement to do this. No, alligator's got his mouth open, a bird comes in, there's lunch. And that's what evolutionists want you to believe, that this all just happened. And they gave example after example after example of events like this, that where one, even with plants, that they require a animal to survive. I guess with the one that Kathy went to at the west side, they talked about a fig and how the fig wasp goes up into the fig fruit and lays eggs. And the female, if she goes, because there's male and female figs, and if the female wasp goes into a female fig, she can't lay her eggs and she dies, but she germinates the fig. And that's how the fig trees exist, is because of these fig wasps taking the pollen from one to the other, from the male to the female figs. Again, through evolution, how did the fig tree talk to the wasp to say, hey, I need you to go between my two figs and germinate my flowers, because that's what a fig is. It's nothing but an inverted flower instead of an outside flower. And that was funny. The NASA scientist got up when he went to speak. And you could tell he's a very inward, shy man. And he gets up and he's looking down. And he goes, how can you tell an introvert scientist from an extrovert scientist? And he goes, the extrovert scientist is looking at your feet, But the flowers are introverted. They don't come out and shine. But how did the fig tree talk to the wasp through evolution to get it to do that? It can't. It's a God thing. That's how God created it. And that's what we see here. Being understood by the things that are made. When you look at creation and you take it for what it is, you understand God created it. It didn't just happen. Even his eternal power and Godhead. In John 1, verse 1, the Word was in the beginning. In the beginning, let me turn to it. I just messed myself up. And I had notes. Keep talking about how the devil works in your life. And he takes every opportunity to get at you. I had sat down this morning and made a bunch more notes to my sheets. And I printed them out and ran here. We were running late because we had the boys over the weekend. And I got to looking, and I've got like 5 or 6 sheets with no notes. And so I'm having to go off of what's in my head. And so I had this verse as a slide, and it didn't come up. But in John 1, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And that Word was Jesus, part of the Godhead. And he was in the beginning. And so we see here in Romans, even his eternal power and Godhead. We understand that when we read the Bible. So they are without excuse. Verse 21, because although they knew God, okay, look at this from a scientific side. They knew God. They know God exists. They know God is there. They did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And we're going to see this here in a little bit later, how they say there's a God, but they can't, in their own hardened hearts, believe in God. They have to do it through science. Professing, verse 22, professing to be wise, they became fools. And we'll see this here in a couple of slides. And changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man. They have taken our incorruptible God and said he's a liar. Said this Bible is just a fairy tale, that he doesn't exist, that he was nothing more than a man. That's what scientists have done. And in so doing so, they have become fools. And they have turned God into nothing more but a buzzard or a pig or a worm, as it states here, a corruptible man, birds, four-footed animals, and creeping things. Well, we started off Thursday night with probably the most unlikely speaker that you would think of in a lectureship dealing with evolution and Big Bang Theory, and it was a lawyer. And he got up and did the talk on the evidence for God demands a verdict. And he gave the example of, he went to a crime scene and there was a person dead in this field. Was it natural causes? Was it by an animal? Was it self-inflicted? Or was it murder? They had no clue. But it's the evidence that they go through, the evidence that they meticulously collect from this scene that decides if it was one of those four. Was it natural? Was it an animal? Was it self-inflicted? Or was it murder? And they found out through the evidence that it was murder. Now you need to find the murderer. And again, it is through evidence. And it's got to be hard evidence. Otherwise it gets thrown out in court because they have nothing to stand on. And he says when we go through this weekend and we look at all the evidences that we're going to bring up, the evidence is there. God does exist. And as we just read, you're a fool not to believe it, because all the evidence points to God. But yet people still deny him. Jeff Miller talked about which God is true, because there are all kinds of gods out there today. There have been all kinds of gods throughout history. So which God is true? India alone has many different types of gods that they have created for all kinds of different things. You've seen pictures and probably videos of India, and there's cows walking all over the place freely because they think they're a god. They can't do anything to them. They can't harm them in any way. They can't eat them because they think they're a god. Man-made, but that's what they think. And so Jeff Miller did a wonderful job in talking about all these different gods that we've seen. Some civilizations like Egypt has several gods, and of course we're all familiar with the Greek gods. Okay? So which God is true? Well, the first question is, what have these gods ever done? Or any god throughout history? And we see examples in the Bible where our God, the true God, was going up against false gods and idols. And God always won. Which altar was it consumed by fire, even though it was soaked with water? The true God. The idols sacrifice just sat there. Nothing happened. Because they don't exist. But when you look at history and you look at, everything, their gods do nothing. Their God has never done anything. Their God will never do anything because it's nothing but a statue or imagination. But yet when you look at the Bible and you look at what our God has done, and you look at the evidences that we'll talk about again this morning as much as I can, everything through our God, through the one livable God, living God, you have the evidence. So which God is true? There's only one. And that's the heavenly God. Our God, like I said, we can prove everything about him is truth. And that's what this weekend was filled with, was just example after example after example How many of you have ever heard of the teleological argument? I had never heard of that term either before I had gotten there. And it is the idea that there is evidence of design in the universe which suggests a designer. And Dave Miller did a good job bringing this type of, like I said, it was new to me, teleological argument and what that means. So, things in science that demand a designer. There was an article in a very prominent scientific magazine, and again, you had to watch the videos to find out what year it was and everything. But the title of the main article was, "What Put the Bang into the Big Bang?" There had to be something there that blew up, that caused the Big Bang. What was it? Well, science, or I should say mathematics, has proven that you can't get nothing, or you can't get something from nothing. Nothing creates nothing because there's nothing there. Mathematics proves it, and when you add 0 plus 0, you get 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. 0 divided by 0 is 0. If you add 0 and 0, you don't get a 1. 0, nothing is nothing added to itself. You have to have something to create something. And so that's one of the biggest problems that they have with the Big Bang. Again, let's go back to Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. But the scientists have the problem of what caused the Big Bang. There had to be something there to bang, to cause everything that we see around us, including the heavens. So what they had to do, there was a scientist, and he wrote this article, and he came out and he more or less stated that you can't get nothing, you can't get something from nothing, that there had to be something there to go bang, and since you can't get something from nothing, that shows that there was a God. They had to have created something to go bang. Whoa, wait a minute, scientist, evolutionist, Big Bang theorist. What do you mean there had to be something that God created it? You don't believe in God. And that's a paradox that they've gotten themselves into, is that we know scientifically something can't come from nothing, so there has to be something there, but what created that something? Well, it had to be a God. Turn to Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's your answer. Read through all of Genesis 1, and you see how he created everything in 6 days. Everything around us, he created. There's your something from nothing. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." I believe in Big Bang. God spoke it and bang, it happened. Okay? Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. And like I said, read through Genesis 1, and you'll see what happened on days 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next discussion was on the cosmological argument. Corey got up and made the comment right off the bat that it has nothing to do with makeup. Okay? And that's what everybody's thinking when you see the cosmological argument. Number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Goes back to what we were just talking about. The universe, all space, time, and matter began to exist, what they call the Big Bang. Therefore, the universe has a cause. There had to be something at that beginning of time that caused the Big Bang. Now, have you ever heard of reverse engineering? That's where you take something like this remote And somebody thought about it, that we needed a way with, the new technology with the projectors to be able for me to stand up here and click a button, and there's a little device on the back that receives the input from this, and it goes to the computer and does more or less but a back button or a forward button when I press these back and forward arrows. Somebody sat down, a company researched and developed it and spent, maybe thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to design and figure this out. Well, another company comes along, we don't want to have to start from scratch and go through all the R&D time and money to design something that's already designed. Let's reverse engineer it. And so they take this apart. They examine the circuitry. They go through the programming and everything. And so they reverse engineering it by taking this backwards to its beginning and then create a new one. Well, that is what scientists have done, and that's what this is kind of portraying here. And this is a photo by NASA, and that scientists know that the universe, the heavens and all, are still expanding. And so they have been able to measure that time frame as to how far the universe is traveling, and they have kind of back engineered it and gone backwards in time and tried to come up with it. And the picture that was shown was more of a triangle, going to a point. Then this is kind of flat-ended. But they were able to trace it back and say, 650 billion years ago, this is when time began. This is when the Big Bang happened. When that little piece of matter that we can't explain went poof, and the Big Bang happened. Okay? So that's what this picture here is depicting, is going back in time to where that green area is on your left. That was the Big Bang. Well, let's go back to the slide we were just on. Therefore, number 3, the universe has a cause. This cause, this is from science, is necessarily spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and powerful, plausibly personal, and known conceptually as what? What does it say right there? I don't know what it is. As God. So that little piece of matter, whatever it was, however big it was, that caused the Big Bang, had to have come from God. So here they are. We don't believe in God. It all comes from a Big Bang, but yet whatever it was that exploded had to have come from a God. See the problem they have in science? When they try to disprove God, it comes back to God. So, where did the Big Bang come, or where did the Bang come out of the Big Bang? This writer said it was from God. Scientific Magazine, and the people in the scientific community said, whoa, wait a minute. So Scientific Magazine had to go pay another scientist to write another article and explain how something came from nothing with some make-up theology, big words, whatever. But that's a problem science is having, is they're realizing that their theories doesn't hold water. There had to be a God. But we don't believe in God. So now what? Next we finally got out of the scientific mumbo jumbo, and I think they did that on purpose so our minds could, kind of ease down a little bit. So how did we get the Bible? How did we get the Bible? There's a lot of Bibles out there. We looked a little bit, just briefly, that there's the Book of Mormon. The Catholics have their own Bible. There are others out there that call to be a Bible. Okay, the Quran we looked at quite a bit. But those were all man-made. They had a beginning, and those Bibles are usually revised and changed and updated because of things changing. Okay, but our Bible, okay, yes, there are different versions, but they're not revisions, okay? They're just rewritten to make it kind of more easier to understand than the King James, okay? But this Bible has never been revised. It has never been changed. The other Bibles, they have errors, and they have to correct those errors. There has never been anything found wrong or incorrect in our Bible. Why? Because it's inspired by God, by the Creator. And they went into it and they talked about how is it that 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago They talked about Moses gave the proclamation of the law that you do not circumcise a baby except for on the 8th day. How did he know that thousands of years ago? They have just proven it. I think it was in the 50s. Somebody did, and there was a certain hormone or vitamin or whatever that in a male, there's only one day to where it is peaked, to where if the baby is cut, he won't bleed to death. Guess what? Day 8. How did Moses know that thousands of years ago when they didn't discover it till just, 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago? Do not eat unclean animals. How did Moses know that 5,000, 6,000 years ago? Because God told him. Don't eat a pig. We have found out just recently why they're unclean. Okay, they had to be fully cooked. And if you had a pig out in the desert, you're roaming around for 40 years with no wood to make a fire, how are you going to cook that pig? You can't. They didn't know about it. They didn't know about microbiology back then. So God says, don't eat any of these animals with the cloven hoof that are unclean, because it will kill you. But he just said, just don't eat them. And we find out years later, hey, guess what? This is true. This is correct. And if you're going to believe it, you've got to believe all of it. And what's the first words? In the beginning, God. So yes. And again, they talked about how we got the Bible. In 2 Timothy 3, 16 through 17, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. The Scripture is given by inspiration of God, the Creator. And it's great for proving evolutionists and Big Bang theorists wrong, because this is the truth, and what they are trying to profess is not. Now, what kind of proof can we expect of God's existence if we didn't dig into the archaeological proof in the ground below us? Brother Moore and his wife have traveled to the Bible lands all throughout Israel, and he had it on the map, all the places that they have visited, and I'm just going to guess maybe 100. Some sites they have just visited. Some sites they've actually been able to participate in and dig things and find artifacts. And of course, everybody's always looking for biblical artifacts. There was one back when I was preaching at Kashmir that I had presented, something that they had found during that time frame around 2000, and it's what they called the Jesus box. And it was a box yay big, what they called a burial box. And there's inscriptions written all around it, and on those inscriptions were the word Jesus. And so that's the reason it was called the Jesus box. Well, of course, all the scientists jump on it and start carbon dating it, which we'll talk about later, and trying to figure out if it's true, if it's real, if it's not. And they finally came up and said that it was a very, very, very good fake. Okay? Because that's what people want. Something that says Jesus on it. Something that's got a stamp that says, yes, we can prove ourselves. Okay? But what does, and I went up and I talked to all the speakers after every session and talked to them about something. And I went up and I talked to Brother Moore about it. And I said two things. One, I don't think that we'll ever find these big, like the Ark of the Covenant, to prove Christianity, to prove the Bible. Because what does Hebrews 11:1 say? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We need to have the faith without seeing the Ark of Covenant to prove that the Bible's true, that God existed. But there are things that come out through archaeology that proves it. Okay? One of the things that came up, recently discovered, is this city that's up on a hill. You can't really tell. And the way you got into the city was because of it being a city, and it was real fortified being on a hill, but you had to come up this side here and go in through this gate. And you could tell it was a walled city. And of course, in a walled city like that up on a hill, you have one point that's really bad for the city, and that is the gate. Because once you penetrate the gate, then you can penetrate the city. So what they started doing was they built these gate areas around the gate itself. And there's 6 rooms. You can see 3 here and 3 kind of over on this side. And they have found out through archaeological digs and everything that this is one of the modifications that they made to cities to help fortify the city at the weak area of the gate. Well, and they had different things here. They don't know exactly what all these 6 areas were for. One was kind of like maybe a weapons area. You can't bring weapons in, so you had to store your weapons here or whatever. But this area here, they have found out in these cities and these 6 rooms on the gates, was a mini temple, a mini worship area. So somebody coming in could pay homage to the idol that was in there, or as they were leaving, pay homage, leaving and praying, whatever, before they left the city. And so what they have found in digging these up was inside of them, there was a toilet. Not what you would normally find in a temple, in a worship area, in a shrine area, as they called it. But when you look back to the Bible, we see Hezekiah was changing the way people worshiped, and he wanted everybody to go to Jerusalem, to the temple in Jerusalem, to worship. And so he was going around and having men desecrate the shrines. And one thing that they were doing was putting toilets in the shrines to desecrate it. When you go to 2 Kings 10, we read of Jehu and how he was determined to destroy all of the worshipers of Baal. He gathered them all together for this worship in a big temple under the pretense of we're going to do this huge worship, this huge sacrifice to Baal. And so he went all through Israel, gathered all the Baal worshipers, put them into this temple, and then put his soldiers on them, and he says nobody comes out alive. And he said, make sure there's no worshipers of God in there, get them out, but kill everybody else. And he did. And in this one act of violence, he killed all of the worshipers of Baal. And after that, he went around and desecrated the Baal shrines. And in verse 27 of 2 Kings 10, then they broke down the sacred pillar of Baal, tore down the temple of Baal, and made it a refuge dump to this day. And when you go to these old shrines of Baal, they find a toilet. And that pretty much is a refuge dump. So again, archaeology, digging through the ground, is proving stories and events and cities in the Bible. Paleontology. You have to have a good raptor story, don't you? I was able to find these 2 pictures on the internet that Dave Miller used in talking about fossils. Do fossils prove or disprove God? And the one here on the left is one that he was talking about. And I want you to see between these 2, they're pretty much the same columns. And we can see here the smaller crustaceans and all working their way up, dinosaurs and all the way up. The 2 things here, this column here and this column, you see here the pre-Cambrian age is this area here that's not marked. And then you have the Paleozoic age. I'm sorry if I tear these up. The Paleozoic age, here the pink, is this area in the blue. The Mesozoic age, this blue is this green. And then the top one is the same here, there. Now, notice on this one, when it goes down, it starts off at 10,000 years for this first, I guess the first layer is 10,000 years. And then we jump down to millions of years ago. So 1.8 million years is when this happened. And we go all the way down to 2.5 billion years here. And the last one, Earth forms 4.6 billion years ago. And that was the beginning of time, Big Bang, evolution, whatever you want to say. 4.6 billion years ago. This one over here is the exact same, but notice, I'm going to have to walk over here a little bit. This is 4.5 to 6.5 TYA. TYA is 1,000 years ago. Not hundreds of thousands, not millions, but thousands. And this is biblically and scientifically based. Okay? and we come all the way down to where they've got 4.6 billion years ago. This one at the bottom is 6,000 to 8,000 years. And he was saying that they're finding out more and more through the carbon dating, which has been proven wrong, okay, that the earth is not 4.6 billion years, but maybe only 8,000 years old. And when we look back through the Bible, and we don't have a perfect timeline, but that kind of coincides with what they say how old the Bible is. Not 4.6 billion. So we see here, again, science is battling things out. And you want to know what helped to disprove the carbon dating? It comes from here in Washington State, Mount St. Helens. Because what they were doing was when they were carbon dating this, they were guessing on all this had to have taken this many years to form all these different layers. And I think it was 10 years after Mount St. Helens, the scientists went in there and looked at it, and wait a minute, this didn't take 6 billion years to create. This is only 10 years old. And again, when they compared what happened in Mount St. Helens for 10 years and compared it to this, it didn't match. And I think that might be what part of what started this carbon dating and checking into it, and they have found out that this is wrong and this is right. Washington State had a part in that. Okay? But again, science has been proved wrong, and the Bible is being proved right through science. It's not because of the Bible, it's because science is proving it, and they're scientists, so what do they got to believe in? Not the truth. They still stick to this chart because that's what we believe in. We can't go to that one because then we got to say the Bible's true, and if the Bible's true, then we got to say God is God. Well, this brings us up really fast through Thursday night and all day Friday. And I'm not going to go through all day Saturday and all. I encourage you to go back and watch or go and watch these videos. I was telling somebody this morning that to me, all the information that we received that weekend was like a 55-gallon drum filled with water. And that was all that we received from these instructors. And what I'm giving you this morning is kind of like just a drop in that barrel. 45 minutes worth for me this morning was about almost 8 hours, 7.5 hours through Thursday and Friday. So I can't cover everything. I definitely can't cover it with the terminology and the expertise and information that they had. So please go and watch these videos. Again, YouTube, Linda Road Church of Christ. Click on their page, go into their website or their YouTube page, click on the playlist for the 2021 lectureship. And again, start at 1 was Thursday night, go all the way to 21, which was Sunday night, which we didn't stay for. We had to come back. So I've still got to watch those last couple of 3 myself. But there was one other class that I haven't covered yet that I want to cover. And that is, why do people doubt when given this information? Why do people still doubt if there is a God? I am sure that at one point in your life that you might have questioned whether there was a God. A lot of people question it when there's a death in their family, or they've lost a job, or they've lost their house due to fire, or whatever. When there's a lot of turmoil in their lives, people question, if there was a God, how could this be happening? And that was kind of the topic that he brought up very first thing Thursday morning. Why do we doubt? Well, several of the instructors went to Job and discussed Job. Job had everything. He was what we would call a millionaire probably in today's time, with all of the animals and the crops and everything that he owned. He had several kids, a great family. He offered sacrifices for his kids every day just in case something happened. And then in walks the devil. God says, hey, have you seen my servant Job? He's upstanding. He's great. The devil says, hey, you've got him under umbrella. You're protecting him. You took everything away from him. He'll curse you. And God said, no, he won't. You can do anything you want, but you can't take away his life. And so the devil rubs his hands together and says, all right, let's go. First thing he does, he takes away all of his children. Boom. He takes away everything he owns. He's left penniless. He's in sackcloth. He's wallowing in the pig mire. His 3 friends are around him, telling him to curse God. God doesn't care about you. Curse God. Job said, no, not happening. In chapter 38, verse 3, God is speaking to Job, and he says, brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. I want to go on down and read the next few verses. Verse 4 of Job 38. Where were you, God speaking, when I laid the foundations of the earth? When I created the earth, where were you? You weren't born yet, but I was there. Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Did you determine if it was going to be round or square or flat? No, Job. I did that. Surely you know. Surely you know I did it. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? The earth is just kind of sitting there at the perfect angle, spinning at the perfect speed, at the perfect distance from the sun. And Big Bang theorists want you to believe that just happened. Or as I covered a few weeks ago, that all these universes are out there, and if you have all these millions and millions and millions of universes that are just like Earth, one of them had to get it right sooner or later. And we just happen to be that one. Yeah, no. They talked about just a DNA molecule inside of a human. And again, I'm not even getting into all this that they talked about, but they talked about the DNA in a human. That one tiny molecule that makes up one little strand in your DNA, the odds of that to just happen was, I think, 10 to the 163rd power. That's 10 with 163 zeros after it, 1 in that many. For that one molecule inside of a DNA to just happen. But yet they want to say all this about the earth just happened. I don't even want to see how many zeros are after that. But we read here, hey, what? God did it. Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. God was there. God was there. Brother Tim Lewis, in his discussion of doubt, turned to John 20 and discussed Thomas. Jesus had just risen from the dead. And we've talked about this, one of my first sermons. And Thomas wasn't there when Jesus appeared to all the disciples. And what did all the disciples do? They doubted it was Jesus. What did they ask? We want to put our hands in the scars and in your side. We want to believe, we want proof that you're Jesus. Why? Because we saw you beaten. We saw you nailed to the cross. We saw your cross dropped into the ground. We saw you mistreated, whipped, stabbed, everything. We saw you die. And we carried your dead body and put it in a grave. And so here 3 days later, you're standing in front of us and want us to believe that that's you. Why? Because they'd never seen a dead body raised before. So they wanted to see the hands. They wanted to see his side. Well, Thomas wasn't there. And so when Thomas comes into the scene, Lord, okay, if this is you, I need to do what they've already done. I need to see the proof. I needed to see the proof. And so sometimes with our human brains and all, we want the proof. We want to be able to do the same thing in order to believe. But again, like we read in Hebrews, it's evidence of things not seen. We've got to have that faith and not the doubt about God. Because the proof is out there, scientifically proven, that it can't just happen. It can't just evolve. It can't just evolve. I always think of it, I saw a show one time of a monkey, I think it was, and I don't remember where it was at, but he has a really long fingernail, hard, that comes out in curls. And so he goes up to trees where these big white worms are. Back home we call them catawba worms, but the big white worms are living burrowed down in these trees, and he goes around kind of like what we do to try to find a stud. Okay? And he finds a worm. And then he reaches down with that long fingernail and clips it with a hook and pulls this worm out and eats it. And I think, and when I think about evolution, I think, okay, so this monkey is going around, I know these worms are in here, and it would be great if I had a long fingernail that I could reach in there. So I'm going to start telling myself now, grow a longer fingernail, grow a fingernail, grow a fingernail, and tell the son, I want you to start doing this, and tell your son, and then tell your children, so that, and maybe in 1 to 5 million years from now, we'll have a grandparent or an offspring that finally has that finger, and where we could do this. How else is evolution going to work? How does that monkey know that he needs this long fingernail to be able to get that worm out? He doesn't. But he has it. It came from God. That's how God created that monkey. So we have proof that God exists. Doubting sometimes in your life is not a problem, as long as you don't turn your back to God and never come back. Believe the proof. Believe the scientific proof that there is a God. They don't. They have the scientific proof, but they don't even believe it. They can't believe their own information because they're so hardened in their hearts that they cannot believe the truth. Again, go to Linda Road Church of Christ on YouTube and watch the videos. Watch them, please. They will help you. You might say, I believe in God. I don't need to watch them. You do. You do. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, I know I went over almost an hour. I didn't even look to see where I got started, but thank you for sitting here and being patient with me. But if there's any way that we can help you, let us know. Maybe you have doubts as a Christian and you just can't get rid of those doubts. Let us help you. Let us pray for you. Let's watch the videos together. Maybe you haven't put on Christ and you realize that that's something that you need to do, that you see that there is a God. And if there is, and you believe in the Bible, then it's something you need to do, and that is to be baptized and be saved. Because it's the one thing that we go to, and they talked about that too, and that's heaven. But we only get there through being